I hope you like my title, Back to the Future with Love. The reason I've chosen it is that I've been a social worker for a long time, then a social work manager, and then a social work academic, and now I'm doing consultancy. And what I want to share with you really is my experience, the things I picked up along the way, and love is beginning to feature big style. My social work training was based on this guy, Bistek, who was actually a pastor. You can see he was writing a long time ago, but it was about the dynamic interaction of attitudes and emotions between the caseworker, social worker, and the client. And that's been there right through. And my contention is that actually it's got a bit lost. So over the years, I've learned about the separation of personal and professional in organisations. Relationships have been seen as fuzzy things and not proper organisational material. And that's been around what's been going on in the organisations themselves and our relationships with professionals in the public sector with other people, service users, clients, customers, whatever you want to call them. There's also been the advent of managerialism, where the private sector was seen as having it, in quotes, as far as getting results, getting through life, having a successful organisation. So in my world, lots of people were sent on MBAs. Now, I learned a lot about MBAs because I eventually jumped out of management practice and went into universities, and my task was to develop social work management education. And I looked at the MBAs as a starting point. But I felt, again, I'll keep using this, necessary but not sufficient. And I've come to feel that some of our organisations, if not many, are actually dysfunctional. And having spoken to people in the green room this morning, I think you'll hear that sentiment come up more than once. My contention is that measurement has become a proxy for quality and accountability, and that's having quite a strong impact on the public sector and human services. Regulation is very important, I'm not denying that, about people, about places, about services and all the rest of it. But I think we need to maybe drag it back a bit. Technology has come to the fore, and I've seen social workers go into houses with a tablet on which they've been filling in assessment forms. Now, I just wonder what that feels like to be on the other side of that. I've become a service user through family members over the years, and I can tell you that I don't actually like it very much. The other thing that I think's been around in the public sector and in many organisations has been a culture of compliance and blame. And I think that's not helpful. I think it's changed how we are inside organisations, and it's changed how we are on the outside in relation to the rest of the world. I have a daughter with Downs. I put the syndrome in brackets because the language is changing. Used to be Down syndrome, and now it's back to calling it Downs. And she also has autism, and those two conditions interplay in a very major way in her life. She has a lot of struggles. She started off in mainstream primary school in a small village with two teachers, and she then moved on to special schooling, day schooling, and then to residential special school, and she now lives in a residential community for people with learning disabilities. Along the way, because of the need to find somewhere for my daughter to go to school, I discovered Camp Hill. Some of you will know about it, and I think there's a theme there that's going to be picked up later in other speakers' talks. It's an organisation set up by Jewish refugees from Europe during World War II and started as a school in Aberdeen. There are now 11 communities in Scotland. 2 of those are schools and 9 of them are for adults. And one of those is a home for older people. And there are Camp Hill places now in 20 countries worldwide. The organisations, I should say, because they are all separate from each other, although there is a federal body. They're based on shared living, and that notion was new when it started, and then it's been through a number of stages where it became very popular, and it's now becoming much more difficult to find volunteers to share their lives in residential communities. So the plan was, and still is in many places, that the place was staffed by volunteer co-workers. So young people often who were from other countries. Interestingly, some countries had an exemption from national service for young people who volunteered. So a number of people came from places like Denmark, Germany, Sweden, Finland, Switzerland, and so on, to work in Scotland as a way of not being part of national service. So that meant there's been a steady flow of young people, many of whom had degrees, highly educated, highly enthusiastic young people. The places are usually in rural settings with large and very beautiful grounds with play equipment for the younger people, sculptures, flowers, all sorts of beautiful things, and a lot of nature very much to the fore. The philosophy in the houses is reciprocity. So, for example, although my daughter is very disabled, she's very limited. Physically, she's not limited, but she's mentally and socially very limited. She had chores to do. She had things that she needed to contribute to the community, from delivering the bread, fetching the bread, taking a young person who was a very small young person, but who was blind and deaf. Her job was to get that child to the meal table. And they did it with a lot of laughter. She often had her hands under the arms of the young person, and she dragged him with his feet, being dragged across the room. And the pair of them were giggling their heads off. But that was her job. She did it. She would not let anybody else do it, and she got a lot out of it. And so did the young boy. The wider environment is very important in Camp Hill places. So there's the immediate environment of the nice building with lots of, inside the building there'd be lots of circles. They'd have circular rooms, circular carpets to signify the notion of continuity and so on. Lots of plants, lots of beautiful wood, hanging, lots of glass, lots of pictures. Lovely immediate environment, candles on the table for meals, flowers and so on. But also the much wider environment of the grounds themselves with all these lovely things in it. And the other thing which is really important is this notion of doing things with rather than doing things for. So the volunteers work with young people, with the residents, whether they're adults or older people or children, to create things, to do things together. This is a shot of a Camp Hill place in Aberdeen, one of the schools. You can see the trees, the grass, and all the rest of it, and there's a house there just to show you what the house looks like. This is another house. In that house would be about 20 people. A dozen or so would be co-workers, some of whom would be single, some of whom would be married and in relationships, and some of them would have children, and some of them would be retired co-workers. So they continue to live as a small community within a house, and then there would be 6, 7, 8 residents, children, older people, people with learning disabilities, and so on. So very much an inclusive kind of household. In Camp Hill in Aberdeen, they worked very closely with the University of Aberdeen and then Gordon University to develop a BA in social pedagogy. And what that has done, of course, is actually include the folk who were already there and perhaps getting older in a qualification at degree level, but also encouraged young folk to come from other countries in order to do a degree for those who didn't already have one. Social pedagogy regards the individual as a whole person, a social person, and it works with and uses the group. So it's very much attention to relationships between the individuals and the group, and across the whole group. It's a relational approach involving head, heart, and hands, which I think is a really lovely way of capturing how to be alongside people. The training emphasizes creativity, shared activity, and those activities could be sport, cooking, drama, crafts, art, music. The thing I used to love about the Camphill School in Aberdeen, where my daughter was that the children were woken up in the morning by somebody walking through the house and either singing or playing an instrument, like the recorder or the fiddle or the guitar. Lovely way, so much nicer than an alarm clock when you think about it. Another central aspect to social pedagogy is this categorization, if you like, or way of defining the 3 Ps, the professional, the personal, and the private. The professional is about professional responsibilities, duties, concerned with professional knowledge and skill, and using the head, basically. But also all of those things around experience and policies, procedures, blah, blah, all the rest of it. The personal bit is about the individual, the worker, not being a robot. Not a mere follower of procedures, but a fellow human being with feelings, hopes, fears, experience, humour and fun. I can tell you I was so pleased to find this. It was just such a relief. I can hear a ripple or two around the place with that. I get that. The private bit is the bit about the individual as a worker that they choose to keep private. So those things are not for sharing. The private bit is the set of boundaries that the worker puts around it. Teamwork and professional modelling is personal positive role modelling is central to social pedagogy. It's about good working relationships, and it's about behaving in the professional role as you want other people, other professionals to behave towards you as a worker, but also modelling good social behaviour for users of services, whatever those individuals happen to be. Interestingly, the social work response to social pedagogy has been suspicion. They don't like the word, they tell me it's too hard, it's too difficult. It's unusual, we're not used to it, but we cope with biology and audiology and sociology and so on, so why not pedagogy? Managers have argued that they don't want another qualification. There are enough qualifications around already, thank you very much. And I have to say some universities have said the same thing because they've seen pedagogy as a potential threat to social work and social care. The regulators have said, well, you can do it, but you can't call it that because we don't like the word, and you have to make it look like regular social care, which kind of defeats the point, really. The other thing which is absolutely crucial to this at this particular time is how folk are ignoring the evidence that's been accumulated from a number of reviews. This goes back to 2009, a chap called Trotter reckoned that clients want a social worker who's reliable, friendly, warm, authentic, straight-talking, goes the extra mile, sees me as an equal. And he actually did a study of quite difficult cases in criminal justice and in child protection and discovered that better outcomes were achieved where social workers used these kinds of approaches. So what does the literature say? Don't want to dwell too much on this, but talked about staff being open to challenge, being honest and empathetic, and so on. And Beckett argues about change for service users, which is mostly what social workers are engaged in. It's about promoting change, comes through experience within a relationship. Looked After Children report, and this postdates some of the awful stories where children have died at the hands of their carers. And what they've argued is that people are trying to do their best in spite of the system. So I'm coming back now to what I was saying at the beginning about organisations. We need to remove the barriers to development of good personal relationships and support those relationships. Theory has been talking about words like boundary, client, delivery, intervention, outcomes. Are these familiar to you? Yeah, some nods around the room, thank you. And we've developed, in some cases, a rigid and standardised and non-personal approach. That's a really hard way to deliver a caring, supportive service. So where am I going with all this? Our current approaches aren't working. I haven't looked very recently at the figures, but my understanding is that the same number of children are dying as a result of injury by their carers now as were dying many years ago when I trained. Now that is peculiar given the emphasis on child safety and child protection. Staff are dissatisfied, services are stretched, and many service users are unhappy with the service that they get. Results figures haven't improved. There's a macho culture inside organisations. There's a lot of blame, and services have become risk averse. And that's happened throughout this country and throughout many others. So I'm coming back now to love. It's not that all you need is love. I'm arguing that love is necessary but not sufficient. What Fredrickson says is that quote up there. I know you can all read. I'm not going to read it out to you. I'll just give you a second to read that. It's from a book called Love 2.0, which I think is really nice, given the link with technology. But it's a step back from how we might currently see it. It's not a special bond. I'm talking about love now. It's not a special bond. It's not a romantic thing. It's not about commitment, sexual desire, or blood ties. It's the micro moment of warmth and connection with another human being. I think if we're service users, that's what we want from the people working with us, and that's what we need to be giving. So staff are beginning to use the word love in their conversations. It's a bit clunky, they're uncomfortable, and they're made to feel uncomfortable by some others. There are some civil servants in senior positions and some ministers in Scottish Government who are showing an interest in the notion of love. And relationship-based work and services are being seen as the way ahead. And I really welcome that. I appreciate it. It's what I want for myself. It's what I want for other people around me. And it's what I hope that the people I work with will be giving to their service users. So all you need is love won't do. We need all of the above. We need good training. We need serious research. We need flexible policies, good people, excellent training, and love. Fredrickson says, micro moments of connection between people. And I love this quote from Jean Varnier. We're not called upon to do extraordinary things, but to do ordinary things with extraordinary love. I rest my case.